Got it.
Excellent. So, good morning, Dr. Robert Sands, expert psychiatrist, decades of experience. We're here again for another great chat and for me to get the opportunity to delve into your mind. How are you this morning?
I'm great, Diane.
You have a look of
I'm
mischief on
ready.
your face. That's always good. So, uh, going over the video we did last time, there was so much. It was so rich, so abundant with wisdom and knowledge, and a few things again jumped out for me that I wanted to carry on and explore this time around. And I'm going to start off with this example and then pose the question to you. So we're in March 2023. And in America, the bank system is collapsing before everybody's eyes. Everybody can see there's a lot of problems with the stock market was halted. The banks are got no money and they've been kind of found out to be doing all kinds of immoral kind of things. And Biden, who is the president, evidently, of the US at the moment, came out and said, shaking, evidently. On some videos, you can see like the anxiety, I would call it anxiety, saying the American banking system is safe, okay? And we've been having these fantastic chats, and I immediately thought, you can't get away with this anymore. People, the kind of polarity between what you're standing there saying and what the whole world can see going on is so incongruous. And it's almost like you were saying last time about these arrogant authoritarians. It's almost like they don't realize that the whole world can now see what's going on. And what it made me think of was, my whole kind of look was like, what is this about? What is this lying about? Do they think people are just ignorant, stupid? They're going to take it all? But the main thing that came up for me was the fear factor, which we started to touch on last time. And is it just fear? Do they lie? Does this government administration lie because of fear, like the English government, like lots of other governments in the world? Do you think it's a fear factor that is based in lies that then leads to mistrust, that then leads to all kinds of breakdown, lack of respect, and all kinds of stuff? Tell me about this fear factor at the top levels of government with these people we are constantly asked to trust.
Wow. International finance, banking collapse, fear, government protecting themselves. I mean, it's all there. It sounds like a movie script to me. But the current, it's an economic analysis that's been ongoing for many decades with camps. Let's say one camp saying, this is dangerous, you can't keep this up. And they're referring to the management of debt, the manipulation of interest rates to achieve political goals, called the politicization of economics, you could say, to serve the interests of, excuse me, the elites, the governments, who you're pointing out are willing to say, oh, everything's okay. Or they're also willing to say, the world is coming to an end. If it serves their purpose, they will use fear, if you want to stick with fear or anxiety as the tool. Let's say it's a tool to either calm or to provoke. Now, if Biden says, oh, don't worry about it, then the markets go up. And it does show how dependent we all are on external validation. Now, there are many educated, competent people who know this is bunk, but they're really a small number. The average person, they have no idea how that if you raise interest rates precipitously, after 10 years of zero interest artificially imposed to achieve political goals, that if you do that, you're going to create a banking crisis, which is emerging, the so-called Silicon Bank. So rather than getting into the economics, let's focus on the psychology of fear and how it can be used. Look at COVID fear. I mean, so there's banking fear, fear of collapse, fear you're going to lose your money. You run to the bank and you have a fear and anxiety. Anxiety is generally thought to be not necessarily attached to a specific thing.
Yeah.
Fear is anxiety, and you can point to the thing and say, I'm afraid of bears.
Yeah.
Or I'm afraid of losing all my money and I'll be on the street.
Yeah.
So people run to the bank and they're scared. And if somebody comes along and says, oh, no big deal, you'll be protected by Big Brother, or, the government will make you whole, which is a legal term for making everybody happy. So, there's fear, and it can be manipulated down or manipulated up, depending upon what you want to accomplish. So in COVID, there was a deliberate policy, which was against the traditional public health principles, to induce and encourage fear in the population as a means of gaining control. Their goal was control of the population, subordination, and that's COVID, but it's the same fear. And now there's the banking crisis, or you might say, let's pick a third one. There's a long list of fears because
there's a food crisis. They're making people fearful about food and not being able to get food. There's another one.
There's food crisis. There's nuclear war. We don't need to expand the list because everybody has their own list in their own mind. They have their own private fears, fear of their child dying, fear of divorce that they don't want, fear of, we can name our list, but the point you're making is that the fear and anxiety are manipulated by leaders who are trying to achieve certain goals. And sometimes we might argue, well, they're trying to calm people down, and that's really good. They're good leaders because they're not scaring everybody. Say in COVID, that would have been good leadership if they would have said, this virus, we're now getting a handle on it. It's really not that bad. It's the fear and the damage of shutdowns and modifying human behavior will be 1,000 times greater than the actual virus, 1,000 times greater of damage done. And we now know that's true.
Absolutely.
That these policies that were fear-driven have done tremendous damage to the world. Absolutely. In retrospect, unnecessarily. So do you want to talk about COVID, or do you want to talk about financial collapse, or do you want to talk about fear and anxiety in general in the smaller scale of the human being as an individual?
Well, what came up for me when I was watching this bizarre thing with a government telling people that everything's okay when it's not, it was this kind of roller coaster thing that then starts to happen, because for me it's just a complete lack of respect. I've always found in people, I know lying becomes necessary for certain types of personalities who find telling the truth and being transparent very frightening. But I was thinking about the government, or it doesn't really matter, it's like any big authoritarian figures. It's like, why have we got so far? Why has the world fallen into a pit of lies and deceit and layer on layer on layer? And I'm just using this Biden thing this week because it really struck me that it's like, okay, you've got this huge lie, and then you've got this, again, like the mistrust, and this could be in a personal relationship, it could be with colleagues at work. So I'm just the concept is fear, then lack of trust, and then lack of respect, Because, you know, people look at any, I'd say the same about the British government, you know, it's just like, what are you lot on about? I have no respect for these people whatsoever, because they are so enmeshed in lying and immorality and double standards and hypocrisy. It's like, how do people in the world detach themselves and hang on to their own moral compass and their own sense of judgment and fairness? Let's go with that one.
Well, I mean, that's a good way of approaching it, because it leads to the possibility of, in fact, there was a book written by Harry Brown called How to Be Free in an Unfree World.
Oh, great.
Or it might be how to get rid of fear in a fearful world, or how to discover integrity and honesty in a world full of deceit and lies. And we have to turn inward and check our own integrity, sort of how much integrity do we have as an individual? And that varies a great deal. Some people are quite dishonest with themselves. They say one thing and do another. And so the contradictions in human nature are well known. So we're not all angels, for sure. But as we get older, maturity and wisdom are supposed to provide methods, mental methods, that will calm one down in a situation where you might be full of panic. Let's say panic prevents thought. If you're full of panic, you don't know what to do, you forget what you're going to say. Everybody knows that. We've all been in a situation where we lost our coherence. And then you get more and more experience, and you discover how to manage that panic or anxiety, not necessarily with medications, but with preparation, experience. So in fact, it makes me think of the famous Rudyard Kipling poem called If, which ends, then you'll be a man, my son. It ends that way. Well, what does it mean to be a man? It means you can handle all these, or a woman, really, a mature person. He should have said, to make everybody happy, he'd say, then you'll be an adult, my son, my daughter, by saying that if you can handle all these things and realize that kings are liars, and, you know, there's all this falderall going on in the world, and you can still be true to yourself, then you have internal integrity, you have self-respect, and you have a clear mind, a sound mind. It's almost biblical, because you'd say, I think there's something in the Bible about having a sound mind, that we're born with the capacity for a sound mind, but we're also born with the capacity to be deceived. Absolutely. To be lied to. And of course, lying is a whole subtopic of this, is like, why do people lie? One reason they lie is simply for power and money. And there's laws that say, if you lie if you're a chief executive officer giving a report to stockholders and you lie about numbers, you can be prosecuted. And so there are boundaries and consequences for liars that kind of keep the world straight.
Apart from, I find at the moment, that's not happening, isn't it? I think there's so much frustration with the world situation, because people aren't being held to the constitutions and laws that maybe the average person would be, but they just, these arrogant, authoritative figures, they're just kind of out of control. And I was thinking, it wouldn't have been interesting if Biden had come to that press conference and he would have said, obviously we have a problem here. We're doing what we can. We're doing everything that we can, and just acknowledging there's a problem. It makes me think of, you know, that classic thing that people say, once you acknowledge you have a problem, it's half the problem, kind of, you know, solved, because it's like, okay, we've got a problem. Yes, we've got a problem. The banks are collapsing, or, you know, whatever's happening in anybody's country. We have a problem, and I just find this constant layers of, I mean, and in the end, people must get themselves in such a tangle of, like you say, of lies, deceit, and the point you made is so true, because what I wrote down here is about maturity. You know, because it's a very childlike thing, I would think. You can tell me in your professional opinion, a childlike thing to lie. Children begin by lying, and you have to teach children not to lie, and it's okay to tell the truth. Okay. And so when you see a president of the USA going, everything's fine, and obviously behind him it's like, you know, it's kind of everything's just collapsing. It's like, just what, there's like a childlike this kind of whole kind of just being detached from that truth. It's like, wow. And a maturity, surely in a mature, spiritual, balanced world, someone could come out and go, oh, yes, we've got problems here, we're doing what we can. What do you think? Even in relationships, anywhere, someone could just go, look, I'm not very happy. I'm frustrated, I'm this, I'm that, and the other. I think we need a little bit of a chat, or go and see someone, or have a break, you know, have a separate holiday. Why do people find it so hard to tell the truth?
Well, because they believe their short-term goal is more important than the long-term goal of having a relationship. Because if you lie, you'll be found out. Now, children, I'd like that you bring up that lying begins in childhood, and all children lie. And the best way they develop character is to be caught and to be consequenced. The great yearning of human nature is to not have a consequence for their actions.
Is it?
Yes, it's.
Is it?
Right. If we all want to be forgiven immediately for our transgressions, and we do not want consequences, but it's the consequences that are the teacher. And so what you want, if your kid isn't lying, you kind of wish that they would lie so you could catch them, because catching a kid lying and giving them a consequence and a little talk is the way they develop character. If you let them get away with it, then they become habitual liars. Now, we could talk a lot about lying, because I see a lot of it in the office. One example with this teenage girl with ADHD, and she comes and complains that all of her friends are abandoning her because she lies to them. Oh. And I said, why do you lie? Let's understand why. She said, I lie just because in the moment I say the thing that seems the easiest thing to say. Oh. Well, she ended up taking medication that gave her more coherence of mind. So she started following a policy of not lying, and instead facing the truth, and her life improved greatly. So you might say she was an impulsive convenience liar. She just lied for what appeared to be a convenient thing. And only when her mind calmed down could she develop some structure, some sort of ethical habit of saying, well, I want to stick to the truth. So I see this as a common clinical thing, lying. There's a book called by a psychiatrist called Lies, 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 about how lies are just everywhere. And what you want to do is move away from lying towards the truth. But in fact, they're prevalent, and it's obvious in political life that you lie in order to keep power. And if you're caught and you have no consequence, then what you learn is that you can lie as much as you want because there is no consequence.
Absolutely. So this can actually start in childhood. I love what you said about we all yearn to not have consequences.
Of course.
That's hilarious. And I'm thinking about it, and it's like, so basically people want to do, so do you think like people just want to do whatever they want to do, get off scot-free with it? There's actually no true moral compass in quite a few people, and they just want to be, free and wild and do what they want, and no one actually should ever ask them to take responsibility or have consequences. Do you think that is a running theme of humanity?
Well, I think so. I would call it childhood or primal narcissism, that I want to do what I want to do, and I want to go where I want to go. I mean, it's really universal.
Wow.
And actually it's prominent in childhood, and then you find your place in the world, and you have an educational system that causes you to postpone your immediate gratification, and you have to do something that somebody else says, and you come out of this belief that you're the center of the universe, and then you learn that there's an outside world, and gradually you accommodate to that world, and still you hold your yearning to do what you want to do and go where you want to go. And then you get to be my age, and then you want to go where you want to go and do what you want to do. Like older people, that's their dream, to retire and be in the Garden of Eden again, where you can do everything you want. And so it's very human, very universal.
So do you think lying basically is a fundamental element of human nature?
I think, I don't know if lying is the core point as much as wanting one's way and learning to manipulate the system. I mean, we were all kids. Don't you remember the teachers that you could not manipulate? And so, and the ones that you could manipulate, and you went into their classes. So it's really, it's more than lying. It's self-centered in how intelligence really wants its way. I mean, it's kind of a negative view of childhood. I don't want to be too negative, because while this is occurring, there is an emergent appearance of the moral compass. And there are kids who lie.
That has to be taught, doesn't it? That doesn't, if you left a child without teaching it the moral compass, that child would just be like a wild animal, just would, it would just do what it wanted constantly and have no morals, would it? Or do the morals naturally emerge?
Well, I think the behavior might be moral because of laws and consequences. In other words, some people behave because they know that if they do something, they'll go to jail, and that's what causes them the consequences. So if your kid is a particularly narcissistic and not well socialized, you make sure they understand, if you do that again, here's what's going to happen. And then they think, oh, and then they say, well, do they really mean it? And of course, if you're a parent who doesn't mean what you say, the kid learns that they can do it again anyway, and they'll be forgiven again and again and again. There will be no consequence. So everybody's different. There are some magnificent children who have, in fact, there's books about the moral development of children, and young children can be impressively moral. The average child learns their morality by how they experience life, what consequences they receive, what teaching messages they receive, although I think consequences are more important than lectures. You can try lecturing the child, but usually the eyes glaze over.
I tell you what comes to mind with this, two things. One is, one of my favorite books is by an Indian Swami called Paramahansa Yogananda, and he wrote a book called An Autobiography of a Yogi. And in one of these chapters, a guy has all kinds of life problems, and he goes to see this guru, and the guru prescribes for him that he has to tell the absolute ultimate truth for a whole month. And so this guy has to tell the truth to his wife, his family, his work colleagues, his boss, and he ends up just, his whole life just collapses for weeks. and he ends up in court because he's telling people exactly what he thinks, And actually, when he goes to court, the judge who's going to sentence him finds out that he is a follower of this guru, as is the judge. And the judge understands the prescription that this guru is given to him in order to learn about truth. And the whole point of the whole kind of story is that just try telling the truth for just for a week or so, and once it's out and everyone knows where they stand, then you have a new beginning to kind of work from, and you're freed, you're liberated from this burden of this lying and deceit and everything. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. And the second thing I wanted to say, because I think it all rolls in with fear and mistrust and the regret that we might get onto, but tell me what a pathological liar is. Tell me what the actual kind of
well, I mean, it's a compulsive liar, a pathological liar, a prevaricator. That's what a legal term, I think, a prevaricator. It's someone who lies with impunity, meaning they don't feel any internal conflict about lying. They're free to say whatever they want to say that their intelligence advises them to, and they do it skillfully and without any internal conflict, and apparently without any anxiety. If they're a bold liar, they lie boldly because they have no fear of consequences.
Interesting.
So
really?
a sociopath, and I'm bringing in another concept than liar, pathological liar. A sociopath is generally free of anxiety, and that's why they're able to do all sorts of illegal things or immoral things or things harmful to others, because they have no internal checkpoint. The only thing they respect is an external risk of being caught, and they may even ignore that risk. So if they're a foolish sociopath, then they get caught all the time because they're stupid. But if they're smart, they kind of know the lay of the land. They know if they're going to get caught. They have experience, so they can con people. The thing about a con is that you're taking advantage of the naivete or the assumption of goodness. Most people have the assumption of goodness. And so if you're a sociopath or a pathological liar, con man, you can make hay in the world because there's no end to naive people who will take in your lies. And so that's the other side of the liar, is why do people believe so easily?
And that takes us all the way back to government and to arrogant, authoritative people. You could look at these and think, are they sociopaths? Are they narcissists? Are they psychopaths? Are they people that just crave to be manipulating others so they get into positions of power and use it? I mean, one of the words that I'd like you to talk about was what you were saying about, and I don't really understand the word, that safetyism. Can you explain to me what safetyism is?
Oh, yes, it's a word coined by the psychologist Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, who wrote a book called The Coddling of the American Mind.
Oh.
I think that's it, coddling. And it's about the treatment of college students as if they're fragile and they need safety rooms, and that safety is the prime imperative of life, is that we remain safe. And so it really is anxiety run amok.
Wow.
When everyone is treating everybody else as if they're fragile, they need to be safe. And you hear the parent say to the child, be safe, or have fun. Some parents say, work hard, but be safe, be safe. Now, since COVID, it's like, be safe, be safe.
Yeah.
In a way, they're saying, Be scared.
Yeah.
Be scared. And the more you, and actually what you want to do is the opposite. If you take someone with anxiety and work with them clinically, you expose them to the thing they fear. You force them or encourage them or require them or coach them into facing their fears and overcoming their fears. You do not tell them, you need to be safe, you need to go to a safe room. What's being recommended in terms of safetyism, and I would call that an obsession with safety. What's the opposite of safetyism? It might be foolish boldness, where you don't pay attention to reasonable safety, and you go charging off thinking that you're invulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not smart. But being obsessed with safety is not helping anyone. It's
Absolutely.
just creating a culture, a fear-based culture that allows for the authoritarians to have more control because you're more subordinated. You're fearful and therefore subordinate.
Absolutely. And I love what you just said is so true. When you're actually, and people often don't really understand the power of words, and that what you just said there, be safe, actually means be scared. And be scared means, that again, it's that constriction that comes with that underlying message. And what a lot of people don't realize is the underlying messages that they get exposed to. And that going right back, going to the fear stuff, and then because then that's going to make you mistrust the world, isn't it? It's going to make you mistrust the world and the whole thing, and be safe and go to your little safe space. And what is a safe space? It's it's a created bizarreness that, again, you make people dependent on this almost fantasy, this idea of the world isn't really safe, is it? Is the world safe? You just have to go, well, it's not safe, but I have to go out there and do it anyway.
Well, I think it's a regulatory challenge that you don't want to be too safe, but you also don't want to abandon common sense about what's smart, or so a certain amount of safety in the workplace or whatever is fine. But when it becomes an obsession and it starts to cause a kind of self-defeating pattern of encouraging young people to watch their anxiety, and if they're anxious, they retreat rather than move forward, that's not good. I mean, that's creating cripples. This is how you actually create dependency.
Absolutely. You're so right. You just shouldn't laugh, but it's just so on the nail. You're creating cripples. And also it's that's really funny. Because you do completely disempower them, but it's a weird way because they almost try and use that safetyism in order to control everybody else, don't they? No one else can say, oh, F you, or, if they want a pronoun of they, and someone says you or he or she, it stops everyone else being free and open with what they're saying, doesn't it? It's a mechanism of controlling their environment, which is quite an interesting way of looking at it. Instead of them being vulnerable, they're actually not vulnerable because they're trying to control everyone else in their workspace or at home or, wherever they are online.
Well, it's generally true that anxious people are more concerned with control. They're fearful or anxious, and they're constricted. It leads to a constriction of their experience of life. So if you overcome your anxiety, then you can move out into the world. You can still be smart, and you can still, for example, if you're doing public speaking, you might have some fear or anxiety, but you go ahead and do it, and then you build confidence and you move ahead, and
you feel great.
And so it's really an attitude about the world where you don't jump out of airplanes to overcome every anxiety. That's actually one way. It's called exposure therapy, where you just do everything that you're afraid of until you're not afraid anymore. Fine. Some people do that, and it does it does make them fearless, but it doesn't necessarily give them wisdom about negotiating the details of a dangerous life where there's political risks and interpersonal risks and financial risks. Those all have to be learned through experience.
Absolutely. We're out of time, but before we go, I will say I did overcome I had a fear of, I love animals, all animals, but I did used to have a fear of horses because, you see people that fall off horses, break their necks, paralyzed, break the, they get kicked, whatever. I used to have a thing about horses. And then I made myself go riding, just little hacks, nothing, not jumping, but I did make myself do it in order to cancel out that fear and just kind of just go with it. So have you ever done kind of something that you've overcome, you feared something and then you thought, okay, I'm just going to.
Right. And that's standard mastery called successive approximations, where you do gradual exposure to the thing a little bit at a time, extinguish, and then you have mastery. Your fear is gone and you're basically retraining yourself. That requires a desire to be free of the anxiety. And most people really don't want to be anxious. It's not fun being scared all the time. And it is certainly not good for leaders to induce fear to manipulate populations, which we've been seeing now for years. It's
Absolutely.
Really something.
And on a final note, what fear have you overcome by exposing yourself to? Did you ever have a fear of anything that you've managed to conquer?
I had a lot of fears. I grew up in Alaska and I had fears of rough water and boats and storms. And so I would go out in the storm until I gained confidence that the boat and the waves and I were going to be fine. Fantastic. And lo and behold, it worked. Same thing with bears, fear of bears.
Yeah, and that's a realistic fear, isn't it? It's a kind of, you can point to that and go, yeah, I don't like that. I don't want to be kicked by a horse and be paralyzed. I don't want to be mauled by a bear. It's okay. Okay, on that note, Dr. Robert Sands, beautiful to spend time with you again. And we haven't quite got through everything, so maybe next time we'll just carry on and we can look at anything I've got written down here that I think can carry over and we can explore. But that was just perfect. That just flowed so brilliantly. So thank you so much for your time again and your expert wisdom. It's a real joy to chat with you. Thank you.
I am very impressed how you take these ideas and run with them and you relate them. You're curious about them. They are meaningful and relevant to modern life and human nature and what's going on in the world. And definitely it's helping people have a way of understanding complex things. So
absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay.